You're listening to Go with Jamarlin Martin. We have a go hard or go home approach as we talk to the leading tech leaders, politicians, and influencers. Let's go. We're here with Travis Holoway, the founder and CEO of Solo Funds.
How you doing, man? Pleasure to be here.
Good. Tell us a little bit about your background and your path to creating Solo Funds.
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and just a little bit about how I grew up. My parents were very strategic with how they raised me. They wanted me to experience all different types of walks of life and diversity. So, elementary school, I was the only black kid in the class. Junior high, there was like 2 white kids in the class. High school, it was 80% Latino. So when I grew up, I was exposed to a lot of different things. And what was different between my life and a lot of the individuals that I became close with when I was little is that I had both parents at home and we lived a pretty comfortable life. But there were frequently times where, my friends in my peer group, I would go to their homes and their lights were cut off and they were going through real, tough circumstances at home. And that kind of stayed with me as I continued to evolve through life. And when I went to college at the University of Cincinnati, I became passionate about, having an impact and making a change. After graduating from University of Cincinnati, I moved to New York City, worked in finance as a financial advisor and as director of training and development at one of the largest financial planning firms. But while there, I really started to kind of get back to my youth and see that there's a major disconnect between the average middle American and these very wealthy individuals who are in, on the East Coast and that Gold Coast, what they would call Fairfield County in Connecticut, Greenwich, Connecticut, that area. So at that point, I said, I think that there's a problem that I'm feeling. And that problem was that people kept asking me for money and I didn't really know why. And I realized that they were asking me for money because they didn't really have access to money. And originally I was like, well, maybe it's just because I work in finance and I live in New York. But, why are they asking me for $50 or $150 or $200? Like, what can that really do for them? And I didn't realize that was the difference between putting gas in the car and making it to work and not getting fired. That was the difference between lights on, lights off. And that took me back to my childhood of experiencing that with my friends. I thought that this was a problem that only plagued people that look like me because I'm black and the majority of my friends are a minority. And when I looked at the numbers, I quickly realized that, at that time, 76% of the country was paycheck to paycheck. And that number has since went up to 78%. So we're really trending in the wrong direction. And then the bigger stat to me was that 47% of the country doesn't have $400. So at that point, I realized that, there is a major issue in this country, and it's that individuals are being left out. They have no exposure to capital, especially small dollar loans. And when I looked at how they're solving that problem today, it's by taking payday and title loans, which, if many of you don't know, carry 400% interest rates. On average, they're reported to bureaus to help negatively impact your credit scores, but not reported to positively impact your score.
You mentioned you went to schools that were majority white and then Latino. Mm-hmm. That's correct?
Yes.
How many times were you called nigger?
Man, I actually transferred high school my junior year, after my junior year, and I actually went to a different school my senior year because I was called nigger.
I could relate to that. I've probably been in 25 fights since elementary school, where I went to predominantly white and Latino schools. And, you get a sock as soon as you say that. So, no, absolutely. That was a word that, it wasn't, I'm not going to pretend that it was common to me. And I think that's why I blew up the way that I did when I was in high school. But I think I blew up the way that I did when I was in high school because it was a predominantly, Latino school. And there was a very small percentage of white individuals at that school. And when I was called that word, and then the administration does not reflect the population of the school, didn't understand where I was coming from. I just had so much built up emotion that I couldn't even express it. So all I could do was just say, I gotta go. Not that I run from my problems, but it was just, I just couldn't believe that in a school that, that had that type of demographic population, that the administration could be so oblivious to what that word really means. Talk about the demographic of the underbanked, specifically, the demographic that you're targeting.
Yeah, so the demographic that we're targeting is really the payday lending industry's target demographic, which happens to be single women. And a lot of times that's single minority women. It's kind of a weird thing because you always talk about, like single women raising kids. There's this misconception that there's more single women parents than there are men who aren't single parents as well, but it's typically because the female has the kids. And it's very difficult to make ends meet. They're often working multiple jobs, and they're often working jobs where their hours fluctuate. One, wage stagnation is a real problem, but also wage fluctuation is another major problem. If you're a bartender in Cleveland, Ohio, and there's a blizzard outside, you can't expect to make the same amount of money that you would make in the summertime, and it's the NBA Finals and the Cavs are playing. That's a major demographic.
What's the age sweet spot for you?
So the age sweet spot is really between the age of 25 and 35. So it's kind of a larger gap, but that's typically the age at which individuals have kids and are having kids who are starting school and dealing with, major changes. And those major changes could be, just simple things like buying school supplies, buying school clothes, repairs for homes or cars, etc. College students as well. So that demographic is a little bit younger, but college students, and I can, recall this vividly of having friends who could not call home to mom and dad when their car broke down in college. I had the advantage of being able to do so, but that's a huge demographic for us as well. Books are expensive. Expenses during school are very expensive.
Describe what your business does in one sentence for our audience.
Solo is a mobile lending exchange created to provide more affordable access to loans under $1,000.
You're in Austin at the South by Southwest conference. What are you looking to accomplish here?
For me, South by is all about networking, who I can meet, who I can rub shoulders with, and hopefully those relationships that are obtained here can be nurtured and kind of curated to, longer, more enduring relationships. And when I say relationships, I'm really looking for, relationships with investors, but also just my peer group. Because when you're able to meet people who are on the same road as you can share stories, you can share experiences, and then you can also point people in the right direction. Because I may know someone that someone else needs to meet or who they should be talking to. And then the inverse is the same for me.
As you know, these events are pricey. Can you talk about the ROI for your prior investments into industry events such as South by?
They are expensive, which means you can't come here and just drink and party the entire time that you're here. You have to come with a real purpose and a real goal, and essentially come with what you want to get out of this, and you can't stop until you get that. When you leave or when you get on that plane or that bus or that car, or however you're leaving, an event like this, you need to get on that method of transportation thinking I accomplished everything that I actually set out to do.
And the black founders that attend these industry events, what percentage probably do that?
Very small. I would say very small. I think that's something that we could collectively do better. I think a part of that is being solved now. There's more events that are kind of curated for us. But for a large percentage of time, there were events that were not curated for us that we didn't feel comfortable attending. We weren't being spoken to when we were there. So at the end of the day, I think we would kind of click up and we would go do other things. But now that we have, there's more people that look like us in this world, and there's more individuals who are actually looking to give back and kind of throw that ladder back to help others. I think that's starting to change.
Yeah, it sounds like John McWhorter would be happy with your response in terms of at least the black founders that maybe not going as hard as they should when they're at the events in terms of being disciplined and serious. John McWhorter talked about in his book when he was a professor at Berkeley that a lot of the black students would show up late and not pay attention to class and make a lot of excuses for academic performance, but he was very critical of the black students at Berkeley, but that just kind of popped up in my head. Who do you most admire in tech and why?
Man, this is a little cliche, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, but it's one of my best friends and my co-founder, Rodney Williams, who runs an amazing tech company called Listener. If you're not familiar with it, you definitely should be. But Rodney, I've seen, and I say that because, one, I feel like if you can't be inspired by your friends, you have the wrong group of friends. But two, I believe that, one, I've seen, it's full circle for me. Rodney was a brand manager at P&G. And when he started Listener, there were numerous times where he would come to New York City and he would crash my couch while he was pitching investors. And that came full circle for me. last year as I found myself in the tech world and in an accelerator program in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I was crashing his place for the duration of that program. So I've seen what he's been able to accomplish in this world, which is amazing. And I would say, yeah, he's the person that I look to, and he's a real mentor to me that I can call on an everyday basis.
So you mentioned you have experience as a financial advisor. Talk about that and how that possibly could give you an advantage in terms of scaling solo funds.
Yeah. So, the way that I look at the market is very different because I know that there's this disconnect between the haves and the have-nots. What I found was that when I was working in that world was that, no one cared about the person who was making $75,000 a year. They just didn't. When I was in that world, I was really focused on people who made, or households that made $250,000 of income, with $500,000 of household income being that sweet spot. And people were just completely ignoring that person that makes, $100,000. And I don't think that was right. And I think that needs to change. And those individuals were essentially getting no guidance. They did not know how to diversify, their capital. They either had it just in cash or they had it just sitting in their checking account or savings account, which is virtually earning nothing. I just feel like, coming from the demographic in which I come from, I know how to speak to my target demographic because I know the things that they're going through, and I know how to relate to them. The average person who's in, financial technology or fintech, what we would call it, they don't know how to speak to the minority demographic. They don't know how to speak to people who don't make, $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 a year. So it's in their messaging. They just don't know how to capture that demographic. They don't know what they want. They don't know what they need. They just don't understand them. So I think that mixture of kind of seeing both sides gives me a competitive advantage.
You use the word minority. Mm-hmm. It's an efficient word to use, but do you feel the word minority undermines black people? That word troubles me often in terms of using minority and just throwing it in the bucket.
And I could totally see your perspective. I think we've started to give a lot of other individuals the minority tag. As well, and I think that they've been able to benefit off of that tag.
Not only that, in the big scheme of things, of course, darker people are the majority. We're not, as African descendants, a minority in any shape or form.
Right.
I just feel like some power is given away when we use that word, but it's efficient. I've
actually never thought of it in that way. Yeah. I know a lot of stats, and there's no major U.S. American city where it's not majority minority, if you would say, and that doesn't only include African Americans. That includes multiple other races that are just non-white. But I do understand exactly where you're coming from. Yeah, and I like that though.
I could actually see where the demographic trends in the United States, they're rapidly changing. I can see people using minority. It's so ingrained, but people are no longer the minority.
Right.
White people are the minority, but people are probably they're so trained.
The problem is that we still feel like minorities because a lot of the places that we frequent are the places that we want to go. We are the minority still. Yeah. Put yourself in Austin, Texas right now, and we are the minority at South by Southwest.
Yeah, this relates to what I believe the promiscuous use of the word diversity, where it's now ambiguous, right? Yeah. Everybody's a minority.
Right.
All different type of people are minorities now. And then within the word diversity, now everybody's in it, right? Black people have a very unique experience in the United States, as you know. We're the descendants of slaves, and our oppression, in my view, is materially different than other groups. And so, do you feel like there's a problem with that minority bucket, that diversity bucket, where black people are going hard with these words? And if everybody's in that same bucket, but they haven't gone through your experiences in the United States, and there you go again. So as you know, with the predatory lending, you get trapped again. That's how we got over here.
Exactly.
Do you see a correlation between that word minority and the issue that I described with the word diversity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you just made a very valid point. And what I would say is I think that it does dilute the experiences that our ancestors have had. not only in this country, but worldwide. And when we dilute what we've experienced, and I'm not even going to say just our ancestors, but what people of black and brown skin still experience today, when we dilute it, we're giving all of that power back, and we're not allowing ourselves to just say, you know what, this is what it is, this is BS, and we're not going to pretend that it isn't this way. It is this way. And we need to talk about it, and we need to be honest. We need to be transparent about what we've experienced, and not go and just say, you know, well, it's okay because other people are being, the Muslims are being oppressed as well, or the Jews were oppressed, et cetera, or the Irish were oppressed. You know, we've experienced some real things, and there's been a systematic, there's been a system that has been created to, you know, keep us in a certain place. And I don't believe, me personally, I don't believe that system has been constructed to keep all of those other, individuals in oppression.
We are seeing quite a few celebrities invest in startups such as Jay-Z, Nas, Kevin Durant, Steve Curry. Do you think these black celebs should have a mandate to invest in mostly black founders such as yourself?
I don't know that it's fair to tell people where to spend their money, but I think that they should have an innate sense that they should be spending their money with people that look like them, because for a very long time, and still to this day, there is, you know, a European group of people who are not spending their money with people who look like those celebrities that you just named. And in order to put ourselves on an even playing field and to give ourselves a chance, I think that we have to invest in each other. You know, when I look at those individuals, I am seeing a bit of a change and a shift. Right? And the shift that I'm seeing is that those individuals who are 40s, maybe pushing 50, are looking down and are being more helpful to the generation after them than the generation that came prior to them. I know a lot of black individuals who have done very well in their 70s and 60s who just don't care to help other people that look like them up. I don't know why that is. But those are the same individuals who Jay-Z will talk about and say that, you know, they never respected him, they never helped him. But, you know, I look at him and I see what he's doing in multiple, you know, arenas. And I would say that I think he is, you know, helping people that look like him. And I think he does have, you know, the platform to do so.
If the data came out dollar for dollar and it said, hey, Jay-Z, Nas, Kevin Durant, Steve Curry, and a lot more celebrities who are getting involved with tech, if the data came back dollar for dollar and said 90% of those of that capital actually went to white founders, do you have a problem with that?
Yeah, I would have a problem with that. I would 100% have a problem with that, because, you know, this isn't going to change unless people that look like us start to understand us. We speak a very different language than the average VC that lives in Silicon Valley or New York City or even Austin, and they don't understand our pain points the way that we do. So, you know, a lot of phenomenal ideas will be started by founders of African American descent because we have different pain points than a lot of other people in this country. Not to say that payday loans don't affect all different races. They have been preying on African American and minority communities in inner cities for a very long time, check cashing institutions, et cetera. But that's a pain point that we feel. So, you know, an idea like Solo, it derives from people that look like me not having other resources to go to. And I think that could be said for a bunch of other companies. I think Bevel, you know, creating a shaving system for people who have a certain type of skin, that's going to be created by someone who has that skin type and fills that pain point. That couldn't be created by someone who doesn't have our skin type, or hair products, you know, created for people that don't have our hair texture. So I think that's important.
Who's your competition, Solo Funds?
We have no direct competitor, but we do have a lot of competitors. Payday lending institutions are one, and that's a very powerful
in terms of your
network.
Approach, though, your peer-to-peer approach, the technology target market, who would be your closest competitor?
I think our closest competitor, you know, there's a couple of companies out there that are, I'm not going to say their names, I'm not giving them free publicity, but they're, you know, what they do is essentially they will pool money together. So if there's 4 people in a room and everyone has $100, there's $400 in this pot, and at some point one of us could take a loan from this pot. We pay interest to the other 4 people who are in it, but all 4 of us can't go get a loan at the same time. Once that loan is paid back, Now I can take another loan from that pot, or someone else can take a loan from that pot. But that is about as close as you get from a peer-to-peer standpoint of what we do, and we're just drastically different. But we have no direct competitor who does exactly what we do in this country, and as far as I know, don't sue me on this, but globally as well.
If you like what you're hearing, you could check us out at Moguldom.com. That's Moguldom.com. That's Moguldom.com. We have the latest information on tech, crypto, the business of Hollywood, and economic empowerment. You can also check me out on Twitter at Jamarlin Martin. Let's get back to the podcast. I've seen quite a few blockchain companies going into this space. Do you feel like that's a threat to your model, or are you considering some type of blockchain application?
I'm not. I think that we will integrate blockchain at a later point. But am I worried about that eating into my target demographic right now? I would say no. We're talking about people who don't know what a Roth IRA is. They definitely don't know blockchain, and they don't understand cryptocurrency. These individuals literally need $50 so that their lights stay on. And if we could get that to them in a very quick way, in a way that they understand, I think that is the most efficient and effective way to do it. Also, just with I'm not even going to go into the fluctuation of currency, but I would say that no, I'm not scared of that right now.
A lot of folks, talk about 1% of VC dollars going to people who look like you, and they talk about this big diversity problem in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
I don't really hear anybody specifically calling out names. Individuals are institutions, right? So a diversity boogeyman who's creating this really bad culture. It's not inclusive, but there's no individuals. There's no institutions. Nobody's like speaking out against specific individuals, right?
Right.
Why do you think that is?
This network of people is very small, and people talk a lot. And as soon as you say something, you will be condemned, and they will go and they will run and say, well, oh, this person said this about this person. Let's stay away from them because you don't know what they're going to say about us.
So you're saying that there's a blacklist system within this club, and you start to speak out. You start to speak truth, calling people out, your ass is going to get blacklisted.
Yeah.
And does this club that you're talking about in Silicon Valley, do they have Negro helpers who they are within this club and they're reporting on other people, and possibly Ben Horowitz, he'll call some of his black boys and say, what do you think about this guy? Or you're saying that's kind of probably how it goes down?
I believe so. And since there's so few African Americans in that space, if you are kind of on the outside looking in, even just with that relationship, that could put you in a tough place, because oftentimes we need a way into those firms or into those meetings. And oftentimes, hopefully, it could happen by someone who looks like us.
Do you know of this club in Silicon Valley? It's a very small club, powerful club. They don't like you, they're going to call up the New York Times and put out a hit piece on you. Peter Thiel's case, Gawker reported about him losing billions of dollars on his hedge fund, Clarion Capital, and at least I believe that was the primary motivating factor for shutting down Gawker. So you're talking about a very powerful group. Do you know of kind of some of their Negro helpers, kind of like that's really part of the club? Like, hey, I'm looking for more checks, and we got to keep some of these more progressive black people kind of, I'm going to warn you about them.
Yeah, I don't know how effective they are in what they do, but I have heard things, both, with my own ears and from other people, who will say that,
if you're black people in the club,
yes,
they're
so
representing the club. They're throwing up that flag.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
so it's they're not throwing up Crip or Pyro. They throwing up kind of a micro Illuminati flag, if you will, Silicon Valley flag. This is what we represent. They're banging for Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I think it's. I think that there's a lot of individuals who are super helpful, and I think that there's some people who only want to roll with the winners, if you will. And until you have been proven to be a winner, you are on the outside looking in.
So if these weak Negro helpers have been co-opted by this elite society in Silicon Valley, and they're banging, how are the people who really represent black people, how should those people bang back against the establishment and their Negro helpers?
I don't know that I've thought through that, and I actually want to make one other comment on that. I think that the Negro helpers, if you will, are no different than that African American person that is, is a partner at the firm and is not willingly helping that person who, is on their first day and they're junior attorney. They're just not being helpful. They don't speak when they're at when they're in the kitchen. They don't offer them, advice, nothing. I think we have a lot of that in every industry, not only this one. I think, when I worked in finance and when I worked in the corporate world, the black people didn't talk to each other. And I never understood why, but it's because we see each other as competition. And we never want someone that looks like us to be doing better than us. And I think that reigns true in this world as well, because, you make one introduction to this person and they become a billionaire and you still make what you made before. I think that can eat at some people.
So I've been to the Facebook campus a couple of times. I noticed that the black people that I saw quite a few African immigrants working at Facebook. Do you believe a lot of the diversity stats that are horrible, at least from a black perspective, do you believe even those stats are very misleading, where essentially a lot of the black people that your Google and Facebook are taking, they are coming from Africa
Absolutely.
or the Caribbean?
Absolutely.
And so if you want to talk about the African American, it's either it's significantly lower or materially lower.
Absolutely. I want to be really sensitive with what I say here on this, because to be honest, I don't know for a fact. But I feel like there's two things. I think when individuals come from Africa or they come from the Caribbean and they come to the States for school, I think they have a different mindset and a different focus once they get here, which oftentimes drives them to be more successful. But at the same time, I feel like those individuals did not grow up in this system that has been created to keep you where you are, keep you from getting to college, keep you in a certain circumstance. So I think that, African Americans have a very difficult time, achieving the same rates of success as individuals who come from immigrant countries.
How fair is this? Hey, because African Americans have been through, slavery, discrimination, we carry a massive amount of baggage in terms of how we see things, right? A lot of us, people will say, are paranoid from that experience, been traumatized. And so when we look at the opportunities in America, we're looking at it within foggy goggles. So one extreme possibly produces another extreme, whereas that sister coming over here from Mozambique or Ghana or Nigeria, she's not seeing all this stuff, right? And so she can she's in a better position to actually go get it. Do you believe that's fair to say that?
I do. I do, and I think there's a different focus. I think that, I think they're coming with a different purpose, and I think that they don't have to. Of course, there's a language barrier. There's, cultural differences. There's, the expense. There's a lot of different things that they're going to encounter. But those same individuals, even though they may come from, Nigeria is not the safest place in the world, and I totally get that. But when you're an African American growing up in South Central Los Angeles with lack of resources, and your schools are terrible, the police is harassing you and your family, your mother can't pay the light bill, there's all of these different stresses compounded. And then the post-traumatic stress disorder of growing up in these very dangerous neighborhoods. I think that compound is enough to keep people, where they are and not let them see the same levels of success that, that a female, maybe perhaps from Nigeria, might realize.
You probably read about this, but the Trump administration is rolling back regulations in the payday loan industry, where essentially the Obama administration put in place protections where, hey, you have to do more due diligence that the person can actually pay back the loan.
Right.
Are you surprised that he's just kind of tearing up stuff like that?
No, not at all, because his friends are the ones who own the payday lending institutions, and they have the dollars, and and people vote with dollars. They don't vote with just ink on paper. They vote with their wallets. And with that said, they have his ear. You don't have his ear when you're just screaming nonsense. You have his ear when you say, I have money. And I'm willing to either put this money behind you or I'm willing to take it away from you.
What would you say that, hey, Obama, in his 8 years in office, he didn't act, at least I'm not aware of him acting in any way in terms of any type of regulatory reviews for your big tech companies, your Google, your Facebook. Obviously, that a lot of the Facebook folks helped Obama get elected and went to the Obama administration, and then other Obama administration people went to Facebook, where that Trump is just banging for his side, whereas the liberals in Silicon Valley, they were letting big tech and the elites out there run wild without any regulatory thought. Just let that shit go because they're funding us, they're friends, they're liberals. Yeah. Do you believe that Trump is just banging for his side, where the Obama administration and a lot of the elites in Silicon Valley who are supporting him and that lobby, they were banging for their side, but both sides are doing damage to consumers, and there's nothing really different about it.
Right. No, I think that's a very fair assessment. I think, Trump that's his game. He knows people in finance. He knows people who are rich, and not to say that the founder of Facebook is not extremely rich, but it's very different. And Trump has no connection to the people who are being affected by the payday and title lending industry. He knows the people who are profiting off of it, but he does not know what a debt trap is, or he doesn't know what that feels like. So I don't think that he has any incentive to have any type of regulatory body keep these people from doing what they want to do.
What are your thoughts on, you mentioned Facebook, what are your thoughts on Mark Zuckerberg? And there is no Mark Zuckerberg without Sheryl Sandberg. What are your thoughts on those folks in that company?
I mean, I think I'll be honest. I think he's one of the greatest minds of our time, just because.
Mark Zuckerberg?
I do. I really do. Just because of how much he's been able to take a company that started with what it was and what it has evolved into. Now, he doesn't do that with a lot of help. And I'm not going to say that maybe he's not the greatest mind of our time, one of the greatest minds of our time, but what he has been able to do is pull from some of the greatest minds that are around.
When you say pull from the greatest minds, what minds what minds come to mind?
I think you mentioned one.
You mentioned Mark Zuckerberg is one of the greatest minds. Obviously he's a brilliant entrepreneur. That's obvious, but when you study the history, he cheated a couple of people early on, including his co-founder. The co-founder has a record of it.
Right.
He pays the co-founder off. ConnectU, the twins, the Harvard twins, they hire him to be a consultant for their social networking site, ConnectU.
Right.
Mark Zuckerberg steals their idea. Yeah. He's the consultant, but he steals their idea, and he's like, hey, I'm going to go start this on the side. So Mark Zuckerberg then settles with them. Yeah. Facebook was fined by the European Union for lying on their acquisition on WhatsApp. They were fined hundreds of millions of dollars, where the European Union said that they were misleading. But, throughout Mark Zuckerberg's history, I don't see a big difference other than he's liberal and Trump's, I think Trump is centrist, but let's say, he's to the right. What's the difference of Mark Zuckerberg and Trump in terms of Mark Zuckerberg running over people, kind of not really? He's very transactional, where he's not concerned about society. He's not concerned about what the world could look like in 10 years. He's just trying to get his money, right? He's running over the co-founders. He's running over the twins who hired him, in terms of how Facebook has handled the Russian investigation, or how they've handled media companies, where, I've had a personal experience with that company. And I'm like, wow, you guys are on another level. Yeah. Like, you guys are out here on these streets, but you're more out here on the streets definitely banging for the evil side. Yeah. So I just see Mark Zuckerberg is Trump's successful. He's a billionaire. Yeah. He doesn't have the wallet, obviously, of Mark Zuckerberg, but he's a technology Trump. He's very transactional. It's not clear this guy has a lot of ethics.
Yeah, from an ethical standpoint, so I think there's multiple ways to look at an individual. From an ethical standpoint, I think you made phenomenal points, and I think you hit it right on. There is a track record of him being unethical, being dishonest, and essentially stealing from others, stealing ideas from others.
But you just said he's your greatest.
No. I don't know. But at the same time,
he just his business execution.
But I'm really only speaking on a business level. And what I'm saying is, I remember the early days of Facebook, when you had to have a college ID to get on it, and I see what they've been able to accomplish over the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
And that idea that was essentially stolen, okay, let's say it's stolen. It was stolen. So let's take that idea. Do we think
like
that
you.
those same individuals...
I mean, like black people, we were stolen, right?
Absolutely. That's a fact. But do we think that those same individuals were capable of taking that company from where it was to becoming what it is today? And I don't know that answer. And if I had to answer that, I would say no, because they haven't really come up with any other thing that's put them in that same realm or that same conversation. The difference between Trump goes out and literally with his rhetoric is speaking out against complete countries and nationalities. And that particular piece rubs me incredibly the wrong way. But then also there's a track record of him being a failed businessman time after time after time. We don't have that same track history of Mark Zuckerberg being a failed businessman. So when we look at it from just a sheer business lens, I think that Trump has been able to fake it. I don't think he got a lot more help from his father than what he's willing to admit. But at the same time, he has a failed airlines. He has a failed, football team. He has, he's filed bankruptcy multiple times. There is a track history of him not being as savvy of a business person as the world wants to believe. But what he has been able to do is market himself in a way that is probably one of the greatest self-marketing minds of all time. I would put Floyd Mayweather in there too, but Trump is just not as rich as people think he is. And I think that's part of the reason why we won't ever see his tax returns.
Fair point. One thing I think is underappreciated with Mark Zuckerberg, it goes to your point in terms of he's bringing great minds in and listening to them. Particularly, one thing that comes to mind is Sean Parker. He talked about how all MySpace had to do was replicate Facebook on the side.
Yeah.
When MySpace was really hot and had massive scale. And that really informed Zuckerberg's M&A strategy, where you've seen defensive moves where any platform that looks like it's going to, could have 1 billion users, I'm going to buy that shit.
Exactly.
Right? So I believe the author of that kind of paranoia is Sean Parker. But I think Mark Zuckerberg gets an A on his M&A.
Yeah.
The M&A strategy has been super on point.
Yeah.
Spike Lee is coming out with a show, and he's calling it the Black Zuckerberg. Do you have a problem with using Black Zuckerberg?
Yeah, it's super corny.
Do we want black boys to be modeled after a Zuckerberg? He has a big wallet, but it doesn't seem like there's no soul behind it. We don't want black boys to have that transactional Zuckerberg Trump, just I'm going to go after my wallet and just kill everybody in the way, right?
Exactly. We don't really even know what that man stands for. So to model our young black men to be him that's just crazy. Like just the thought alone. Spike has been wilding lately, man. I really
he's here.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna make sure I don't go see him. That's kind of just crazy. That's just insane. But no, I don't think that the show should be the Black Jordan either. I don't think it should be the Black LeBron. I don't think it should be.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to title it that, but the way it's being described in the media, the way he's describing it is Black Zuckerberg. And the idea is that Zuckerberg's a genius and this guy's, a black genius.
No, there's a million other people I think that could be modeled after. I don't care if you go use one of the billionaires in Nigeria before you use him. That's just as crazy to me, especially from Spike. Disappointed.
Recently, CNN journalist Jake Tapper, he's been on a media jihad going after black leaders, Keith Ellison, the Congressional Black Caucus, and saying, hey, why are you Negroes talking to Farrakhan? As you know, there was a photographer, Askia Muhammad, who took a picture of Obama with Farrakhan at an event, and the brother held the photograph back and said, I don't want them to use this against our brother Obama. And, he could have got publicity, could have got money, but he held it. And then, of course, he released it, I believe, this year. It makes Republicans think like, see, I told you Obama has something going on that he's not really, telling us. But Jake Tapper, he's going to all the, the black leaders, Congressional Black Caucus. Hey, you black leaders, don't go talk to Farrakhan. Don't try to build a bridge with Farrakhan. He has He's anti-Semitic. He's homophobic. He's anti-Semitic. He's racist, essentially. So why are you black people talking about Trump, talking about the alt-right? Why are you guys taking pictures with Farrakhan? Why are you going to the event? One sister who's involved with the Million Youth March, Tamika Mallory, she went to Savior's Day in Chicago. He's attacking her. Like, hey, you black people are hypocritical. You guys, talk about equality, this and that, but why are you guys going to Chicago to listen to Farrakhan? How do you feel about Jake Tapper going around pointing his finger? Hey, you niggas need to condemn Farrakhan.
I don't like it. People just feel so entitled to speak about everything. And I think obviously he has a platform on a major network, but everyone now has a platform in their pocket, and everyone feels compelled to talk about something and then say what they think other people should be doing, who they should associate with. And it's always with their view of what they believe. But until he is going out and he's saying the same things about Trump, or in the statements that he's making about entire countries and other nationalities, until he's condemning the people who have relationships with people like Richard Spencer. On the flip side, I don't think that his comments are valid. I don't think they hold any weight.
But even looking at a guy like Richard Spencer, is it the same in terms of black people, in terms of our history of being oppressed and where police are still murdering folks? Jake Tapper, if you remove what you call extremist voices, who else is going to talk up and talk independently against the establishment and the lobbies that pretty much have a lot of the politicians and corporate folks, a lot of our leaders in their pocket? So my question for Jake Tapper is, if you remove a lot of these extremist voices, who's going to ride hard for the people in Watts, the people in Compton, the people in Brooklyn and Harlem? CNN, Jake Tapper's not doing it, right? Trayvon Martin or somebody else gets shot. You guys are not going to be in these streets, right? Exactly. So essentially, because of economic insecurity, we don't really have people who can go hard. Everybody's scared to lose checks, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Jake Tapper, who else is going to be speaking out for our people in these streets? Because all the other corporate folks and politicians, they're all paid for, right?
Exactly.
So, I don't believe you can compare, a Richard Spencer or white racism where it's more institutional. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times, people will say things, but what's really important is what you do. The institutionalization of racism.
Right.
Not necessarily just the words and the optics, but, one question I have is, hey, Jake Tapper, are you going to denounce everybody who went to the Trump inauguration?
Exactly.
He's racist, right?
Exactly.
So,
and that's my point. I don't think Richard Spencer and Farrakhan are one and the same. I don't think Farrakhan's the African American version of Richard Spencer. But at the same time, I just don't think that you can't make a comment about one side if you're not making it about both sides. We know that you're not going to stand up against police brutality, against the systematic racism, the disparity of African Americans who are incarcerated. You're not going to talk about it. And who is? Because to your point, everyone is bought. Everyone is afraid to lose their platform, their check, jeopardize their family situation. So until you have someone who essentially can't be bought in a Farrakhan, you're in a tough situation.
Why do you think it would be okay with Jake Tapper for Tamika Mallory and some of our people to go to a Trump inauguration, a racist who's institutionalizing racism? Mm-hmm. You can go support a Trump inauguration. Obama was there, Michelle was there, a lot of black people were there.
Right.
Why would the establishment believe black people should love a Trump inauguration or embrace it? There's no real concern if a black person takes a picture with Trump, right? As far as we're concerned, he may as well be on a KKK with a lot of power and a big wallet.
Exactly.
Right. But why is it okay for people to take pictures with Trump?
Because they call it patriotism. They think, all right, well, he's an American president and he's the leader of the free world. So if you take a picture with him, you're showing that you love your country. You're showing that you're supportive of this establishment. Whereas, the inverse, they're painting him as being anti-patriot. or anti-patriotism. So, with that said, I think that's how they sell it. That's how they get you to believe it. That's how they get you, that's how they get the mass media to buy into that and say, this person is being anti-American because, they're saying these things. But if Trump says, the problem is that his statements are, even though we view them as being racist, in the grand scheme of things, the mass, a lot of the population sees that as being, pro-American, or they think that's how things are supposed to be. That's the difference.
Do you believe it's racist when the elites in this country, such as Jake Tapper, who come from privilege, when you look historically at Marcus Garvey, right, he was brought down by Negroes, right? He wasn't, the government, they brought him down, but Negroes essentially helped the government and set him up.
Right.
But going back from Marcus Garvey to Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, the media has always gone to black leaders and they say, hey, you need to condemn this other black leader that's going real hard against the establishment. They're going real hard against racism. Right. They're going real hard against us.
Right.
This is nothing new what Jake Tapper is doing. But do you think it's racist for these white elites to be coming to the hood, coming to black people? You need to condemn this person.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's just a double standard. And I think the double standard in this particular case is racist.
If black people said, Jake Tapper, you're a Jewish American, you need to condemn the apartheid state of Israel. You need to condemn Netanyahu because he did this, or he's doing this. He's about to kill 100 Palestinians.
Right.
What? You're Jewish, so you need to condemn Netanyahu. Do you believe that's fair to Jake Tapper? To look at that within the context of his race and say, because you're Jewish, you need to condemn Netanyahu.
Yeah, no, I don't. And I think that's where I see this as being, the same across the board. I don't think that he's built to bear that cross. So why should I put that cross on him if he's not ready for it? And it's the same thing for him to do that to other, African Americans who, maybe you don't know their view. Two, you can't bear, you can't, your opinion is now a cross in which you're asking them to bear. And I don't think that's fair for anyone.
Thanks to Travis Holoway, the founder and CEO of Solo Funds. You can check out Solo Funds, SOLOFUNDS.com, solofunds.com.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to Go. You can check me out at Jamarlin Martin on Twitter, and also come check us out at Moguldom.com. That's MOGULDOM.com. Be sure to subscribe to our daily newsletter. You can get the latest information on crypto, tech, economic empowerment, and politics. Let's go.